Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to the grand ballrooms or the bustling factories, but into the quiet, often hidden corners where desperation and survival intertwined. Imagine the biting dampness of a London alley, the kind that seeps into your bones, even through layers of threadbare cloth. Picture the endless grey sky, perpetually threatening rain, mirroring the gloom in your own heart. You're shivering, not just from the cold, but from an emptiness in your stomach that gnaws relentlessly. Every breath you take is shallow, a cloud of mist escaping your lips, only to be swallowed by the polluted air. The sounds of the city, usually a vibrant hum, are now a dull, oppressive roar, the clatter of horse-drawn cabs, the distant cries of street vendors, the relentless, indifferent rhythm of a world that seems to have forgotten you. Your shoes, if you even have a proper pair, are worn through, letting in the icy slush. Your shoulders are hunched, a futile attempt to ward off the penetrating chill. You're hungry, truly hungry, a gnawing, aching void that eclipses all other sensations. You scan the grimy storefronts, the faces rushing past, but there's no relief, no outstretched hand, no glimmer of hope in the sea of indifference. This isn't a story of triumph or adventure. It's a raw, unflinching look at what it was like to be caught in the undercurrents of Victorian society, where survival often meant choices no one should have to make. You probably won't survive this journey unscathed, at least not emotionally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, let me know where you are in the world right now and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've tried everything, haven't you? Scavenging for scraps, a bit of mending here, a bit of cleaning there, but the pennies just don't add up. The landlord's threats echo in your ears, a constant drumbeat of impending homelessness. Your small room, once a meager refuge, feels like a cage, and soon even that will be gone. You watch the children on the street, their faces smudged with dirt, but often alight with a simple game, and a pang goes through you. You wonder if they'll ever know this kind of gnawing fear. It's a hunger that goes beyond your stomach. It's a hunger for dignity, for a way out of this relentless squeeze. You've heard the whispers, the hushed conversations among other women on the fringes, the ones who know what it truly means to be without options. They talk about the life, a euphemism for something you've always averted your eyes from, something that feels both terrifying and, in a twisted way, like the only door left open. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of poverty in Victorian London was a direct consequence of rapid industrialization or a failure of social policy, but for you, it's just the cold, hard reality you live every breath. The idea, once unthinkable, now creeps in like the damp fog through the cracks in the window pane. It's a desperate solution, born of desperate times. You imagine the shame, the judgment, the whispers. But then you look at your hands, chapped and raw from constant scrubbing, and you realize how little dignity you have left anyway. What's left to lose when you've already lost so much? A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that the vast majority of women driven into prostitution in Victorian England weren't doing it for luxury, but out of sheer unadulterated poverty. They were domestic servants who lost their positions, factory workers facing impossible hours for starvation, wages, or women simply abandoned by their families with no means of support. It wasn't a choice for most. It was the last resort. You walked the streets, not seeking clients yet, but merely observing. You see them, the unfortunates, as polite society called them, though you know their true misfortune is the world they live in. They're often painted as fallen women, morally corrupt, but you see the lines of hardship etched on their faces, the weariness in their eyes. You notice how they carry themselves, a practiced nonchalance that barely conceals their vulnerability. It's a strange dance, isn't it? This public performance of desirability, all while your stomach aches and your heart feels like a stone. One quirky tidbit is that some Victorian social reformers, in their attempts to save these women, would offer them emigration to the colonies, believing a new environment would cleanse them of their sins, as if geography could erase destitution. You even heard a joke once, a dark one, among the street urchins. What do you call a rich man with a conscience? A myth. It's a bitter laugh, but sometimes that's all you have. The thought of entering one of those houses, those places with their drawn curtains and hushed secrets, fills you with a mix of dread and a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of curiosity. No, not curiosity, necessity. You've heard tales, of course, the grander houses where women wore silks and velvets, and then the squalid ones, indistinguishable from the other hovels of the poor. You try to imagine yourself in such a place, but the image is hazy, unreal. It feels like stepping into a different skin, shedding the person you were or thought you were, and becoming something else entirely. Remember that biting dampness? It's still there, a constant companion, but now it's joined by a new, colder sensation, the chill of fear, mingling with the reluctant acceptance of your fate. You push your chapped hands deeper into your meager pockets, as if trying to grasp at some last shred of warmth, of comfort, before you take the plunge. The decision isn't made in a moment of rashness, but through a slow, grinding attrition of options, until this, the unthinkable, becomes the inevitable. The decision, once a distant, abstract dread, now solidifies into a desperate resolve. You've walked past this particular house before, drawn by its less ostentatious facade compared to the grander, more notorious establishments. It's not a palace, but it's certainly not a hovel either. The windows are clean, the curtains opaque, but not heavy, suggesting a certain discretion. Tonight, though, your steps falter just a moment before you reach the front door. The gaslight above the entrance flickers, casting dancing shadows on the polished brass knocker, and for a split second, you almost turn and flee back into the anonymous, biting cold of the London night. But the image of your empty stomach, the landlord's sneering face, and the bleak emptiness of your future flashes before your eyes. A colder, harder reality than any fear. This isn't bravery. It's the sheer, unadulterated force of desperation pushing you forward. You lift your hand, a tremor running through your arm, and rap gently on the door. It feels strangely formal, like knocking on a doctor's office or a solicitor's firm, certainly not what you expected. There's a brief, agonizing silence, then the click of a lock and the door opens inward, revealing a sliver of warmth and light. The air inside is different, to not the acrid smell of coal smoke and damp poverty, but something richer, heavier, a blend of beeswax polish, faint perfume, and something else, something indefinable that feels both alluring and slightly suffocating. A plump, stern-faced woman stands in the doorway. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, sweep over you from your worn boots to your wind-chapped face. She doesn't smile, but there's no immediate harshness either, just a practiced, dispassionate evaluation. She's dressed in a dark, respectable dress, with a crisp white apron over it. This is Madame, you realize, the gatekeeper of this particular gilded cage. Yes, she asks, her voice surprisingly soft, yet with an underlying firmness that brooks no argument. It's a voice that suggests she's heard every plea, every story, and has long since become immune to them. You stammer a bit, your throat suddenly dry, the carefully rehearsed words catching. You manage to mumble something about needing work, about being without family, about circumstances beyond your control. Her gaze never wavers. She takes in your thin frame, your patched dress, the undeniable signs of hardship. She doesn't offer sympathy. Instead, her eyes narrow slightly, as if calculating your potential utility, like a shopkeeper appraising a piece of merchandise. Historians still argue whether these madames were simply exploiters of unfortunate women or, in a strange, twisted way, provided a form of dangerous but necessary employment in an era with few options for women. It's a complex question, isn't it? One could say they offered a perverse kind of stability. She steps aside, a curt gesture for you to enter. You cross the threshold, and the door clicks shut behind you, severing your last direct connection to the world you knew. The sound is surprisingly loud in the sudden quiet of the small, well-kept vestibule. You feel a strange mix of relief and profound trepidation. The air is warmer here, and the soft glow of a gaslight casts a more welcoming light than the harsh street lamps outside. You notice a coat rack with several wraps, some quite elegant, and a small polished table with a vase of artificial flowers. It all seems proper, deceptively so. It's almost cozy, like someone's respectable drawing room, which makes the reality of what this place is even more unsettling. One quirky tidbit is that many brothels in wealthier areas often try to mimic the appearance of respectable homes, blurring the lines between domesticity and commerce, making them less obvious to casual passers-by, and perhaps easing the entry for nervous newcomers like yourself. It was a clever, if cynical, marketing strategy. Madame leads you through a narrow hallway, past a closed door from behind which you hear the faint murmur of voices and a distant, tinkling piano. Your senses are on high alert, absorbing every detail. The wallpaper is a muted floral pattern. The floorboards are clean and creak faintly underfoot. You keep your eyes down, not wanting to seem too eager, too curious, too anything. You're acutely aware of the dust motes dancing in the shafts of light, of the smell of the perfume that now seems stronger, almost cloying. It's a stark contrast to the damp, musty smell of the poverty you just left behind. It's a bit like stepping from a grimy alley into a slightly musty, but undeniably cleaner waiting room. You almost want to chuckle at the irony. You've traded one kind of dirt for another, perhaps cleaner one, but dirt nonetheless. I heard a joke once about a man who tried to buy silence in a brothel. He said, "I'll give you a shilling if you don't speak a word." The girl replied, "A shilling for silence? That's more than some of them pay for noise." It's a dark humor, but sometimes that's what you need to get by. You're led into a small, sparsely furnished room at the back. There's a plain wooden table and 2 chairs. Madame gestures for you to sit, and you perch on the edge of the chair, feeling awkward and out of place. She sits opposite you, her hands clasped on the table, her expression unreadable. This is where the real interview begins. You realize this isn't about charity. It's about business. She asks you a series of questions, quick and to the point. Your age, you add a year or two, hoping to appear more capable, less vulnerable. Your family, you say they're gone, which isn't entirely a lie. They're gone to you anyway. Your experience, you lie, of course, saying you've worked as a chambermaid. Anything to sound respectable, to hide the raw, desperate truth. She listens, impassive, occasionally nodding slowly. She's not looking for your life story, you realize. Just the bare facts that confirm you're alone, destitute, and seemingly without other options. A mainstream historical fact is that many madames preferred women who were not visibly ruined, or had obvious signs of disease, as their market value was higher. Your relatively clean appearance, despite your poverty, might just be working in your favor. She leans forward slightly, and her voice drops, becoming more direct. She outlines the rules, the expectations, the payment structure. It's a cold, clinical discussion, stripped of any emotion. You'll work for the house, not for yourself. A portion of your earnings will go to her for room, board, and protection. Protection from what, you wonder? From the very world you're about to enter, perhaps, or from the even harsher realities of the street. You learn about the hours, the importance of cleanliness, of discretion, of pleasing the clients. She uses euphemisms, of course, entertaining. Gentlemen, providing companionship, but you're not a fool. You understand implicitly what she's truly saying. Your body, your time, your very self will no longer be entirely your own. It's a chilling realization, but oddly, not surprising. It's the price of survival. You nod, mute, taking it all in. There are no illusions left. The faint hope you might have secretly harbored that this would be some benevolent refuge evaporates completely. This is a business transaction, pure and simple, and you are the commodity. As Madame continues to speak, you find yourself focusing on a chipped teacup on the table, a tiny imperfection in an otherwise sterile environment. It's a strange anchor, a small, tangible flaw in a world that suddenly feels overwhelming in its newness and its terrifying implications. You're signing up for a life you never imagined, one that will demand far more than just your physical presence. It will demand a part of your spirit, too. But right now, the thought of a warm meal, a roof over your head, and a brief respite from the relentless gnawing of hunger is enough to make you agree. Madame finishes her explanation, her voice unwavering, and you simply nod. There's really nothing to say. You've agreed. The understanding hangs in the air, a silent contract sealed by your desperation and her detached practicality. Good, she says, a slight softening, almost imperceptible, around the edges of her stern mouth. Now, let's get you settled. She rises, and you follow her out of the small room, back into the quiet hallway. The distant piano music is still there, a thin, melancholy tune that seems to float through the closed doors, a soundtrack to your new reality. You can't help but wonder if that music is meant to soothe, or if it simply adds to the unsettling atmosphere. It's a bit like a dollhouse. You think, perfectly arranged, but with something vital missing from the porcelain faces. She leads you upstairs, the narrow staircase carpeted in a thick, dark material that muffles your footsteps. Each step feels heavy, deliberate, taking you further away from your old life, however bleak it was. The upper hallway is just as clean and quiet as the downstairs, lined with several closed doors. This, you realize, is where the companionship truly happens. The air here feels even warmer, almost stuffy, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Madame stops at one of the doors and pushes it open. This will be your room, she announces, stepping aside for you to enter. It's a small room, but infinitely better than anything you've known recently. There's a narrow bed with a clean, if somewhat thin, mattress and a scratchy wool blanket. A small chest of drawers stands against one wall, and a single, cracked mirror hangs above it. There's a tiny window looking out onto a brick wall, offering no view of the outside world, no glimpse of the sky or the street. But it's warm and it's private, a luxury you haven't afforded in what feels like years. A basin and pitcher of water sit on the bedside table, a small bar of rough soap beside them. It's all very basic, but functional. You run your hand over the clean, cool sheets, a strange mix of gratitude and emptiness washing over you. Historians still argue whether the physical conditions in brothels were genuinely better than the slums from which many women came, or if the relative comfort merely masked a different kind of imprisonment. It's a debate that highlights the grim choices available. You'll share a privy at the end of the hall, Madame explains, pointing towards a door further down, and meals will be served promptly downstairs. You'll be expected to be present. She rattles off a few more instructions about keeping your room tidy, about not bringing personal items from outside, about being ready when she calls. Her voice is still calm, but the underlying authority is palpable. It's clear that while this may offer respite from the street, it comes with a strict set of rules, a different kind of servitude. It's not freedom, just a different kind of constraint. It's a bit like being told you can have all the bread you want, but only if you eat it with a smile, even if your teeth are aching. She then turns to the more personal aspects. You'll be provided with suitable attire, she states, her gaze sweeping over your threadbare dress with a hint of disdain. And you will maintain a clean appearance at all times. A woman who cannot care for herself cannot care for our patrons. It's a harsh truth, delivered without a flicker of emotion. You realize how much your appearance, or lack thereof, has already been judged. You're being remade, stripped of your old identity and dressed in a new one that fits the demands of the house. One quirky tidbit is that madames often took a cut of the money earned for clothing and cosmetics, further deepening the women's debt and making it harder to leave. It was a vicious cycle designed to keep them dependent. Madame steps closer, her eyes fixing on yours. Listen carefully, she says, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. This house operates on discretion and order. You are here to provide a service. You will be polite, you will be accommodating, and you will never, under any circumstances, engage in personal conversations with the gentlemen. Their lives are their own, and yours is now here. There are no secrets in this house that Madame does not know. The unspoken threat hangs heavy in the air. You understand, no talking about your past, no seeking outside help, no challenging her authority. It's a pact of silence and obedience. You find yourself nodding, almost automatically. You're learning the unspoken language of this place, the subtext beneath the polite words. It's a bit like learning to walk on eggshells, except the eggs are your own fragile hopes. I once heard a joke about a very proper Victorian lady who, upon hearing about a brothel, gasped, "But what do they do in there?" Her husband, a man of the world, replied, "My dear, they provide quiet companionship, just like a good book, only with less turning of pages." It's a grim chuckle, isn't it? She then lays out the financial terms in more detail, reinforcing what she mentioned downstairs. You'll receive a percentage of each transaction, but a significant portion will be deducted for your lodging, food, and the aforementioned attire. The numbers swirl in your head, A dizzying calculation of what you'll actually keep versus what you owe. It's clear that escaping debt will be a monumental task, possibly an impossible one. This isn't just about earning money. It's about being perpetually in arrears, tied to the house by invisible chains of obligation. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is the debt bondage system prevalent in many brothels. Women were often lent money for clothes, medical care, or even just daily necessities, and these debts were almost impossible to repay, trapping them within the establishment. It was a subtle, yet incredibly effective, form of control. "You will be safe here," Madame says, almost as an afterthought, though her tone suggests it's more of a declaration than a promise. "I protect my girls as long as they follow the rules." You wonder what safe truly means in this context. Safe from the street, perhaps, but certainly not safe from the realities of the life you are about to embark upon. It's a different kind of danger, a more insidious one that slowly erodes your sense of self, your spirit. You look around the small, clean room again. It's stark, almost monastic in its simplicity, but it's a roof over your head. And for now, that's all that matters. You tell yourself that, trying to believe it with every fiber of your being. Madame gives you a final, scrutinizing look, as if searching for any sign of defiance or weakness. Finding none, or perhaps just accepting what she sees, she turns to leave. "Rest now," she instructs. "Dinner will be served in an hour, and tomorrow we begin." The door clicks shut behind her, leaving you alone in the quiet room. The silence is thick, heavy with the weight of your new reality. You walk over to the small window and press your face against the cold glass, but all you see is the unyielding brick wall outside. Your reflection stares back at you, a pale, uncertain face. No longer quite your own. You feel a profound sense of isolation, but also, surprisingly, a tiny flicker of something else, a dull ache of relief that, for tonight at least, you won't be sleeping on the cold, unforgiving streets. The quiet in your new room is absolute, broken only by the faint creak of the house settling and the distant, muffled sounds of the city. You sit on the edge of the bed, the mattress surprisingly firm beneath you, and slowly, cautiously, you begin to take in your surroundings. It's not much, certainly not luxurious, but it's yours, for now. The single window, as you discovered, offers no escape, no view of the bustling life outside, just the unyielding brick of the adjacent building. It's a symbolic view, perhaps, of the new confines of your existence. You run your fingers over the smooth, worn wood of the small chest of drawers, wondering about the women who occupied this space before you. Did they feel this same blend of desperate relief and profound dread? Were their dreams also slowly suffocated by these four walls? Then, a soft knock at the door, and before you can fully register it, the door creaks open. A young woman stands there, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. She's perhaps a few years older than you, with weary eyes that seem to have seen far too much. Her dress, while similar in style to what Madame described, is a bit more ornate, a little more worn, suggesting she's been here for a while. She carries a small tray with a single mug, steaming gently. "Madame said you might be needing this," she says, her voice low and surprisingly gentle, almost a whisper. Warm milk helps settle the nerves. You nod, grateful, and she steps inside, placing the mug on your bedside table. As she does, your eyes meet hers. There's no pity, no judgment, just a quiet understanding that passes between you. It's the look of someone who has walked the same path, who knows the cold fear of the unknown that you're currently experiencing. I'm Eleanor, she offers, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. And you are? You tell her your name, a name that suddenly feels less like your own and more like a relic from a distant past. She nods, a silent acknowledgement. This is your introduction to the other girls, not with a formal greeting, but with a simple act of quiet compassion. Eleanor doesn't linger, but before she leaves, she offers a piece of advice, her voice barely audible. Keep your wits about you, and don't trust anyone too much, not even yourself. Then she's gone, leaving you with the warm mug and her cryptic warning. It's not exactly a welcoming committee, but it's more than you expected. You take a sip of the milk. It's warm and sweet, a small comfort in the vast ocean of uncertainty. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our last chat? This is the opposite of that. A small, genuine kindness in a place you expected only cold transactions. As the evening progresses, you hear more sounds from the house, the occasional burst of laughter quickly stifled from downstairs, the creak of floorboards above, a door opening and closing. You imagine the other women performing their duties, living out their own stories within these walls. You wonder what their lives were like before, what brought them here, just as poverty brought you. A mainstream historical fact is that many women in Victorian brothels formed strong bonds of camaraderie and mutual support, often viewing each other as their only family in a hostile world. They shared stories, offered comfort, and sometimes even helped each other hide small sums of money for a possible escape. It was a network of survival, born out of necessity. Later, the bell Madame mentioned rings, a clear, insistent chime that signals dinner. You smooth down your dress, conscious of its shabbiness, and make your way downstairs. The dining room is small but bright, lit by several gaslights. A long wooden table dominates the center, and several women are already seated, most of them in various stages of their working attire, some in simpler dresses, others in more elaborate gowns. Their hair artfully arranged. Their faces are painted, some subtly, others more boldly, their eyes bright but also carrying that same weary knowledge you saw in Eleanor's dot as you enter. A silence falls over the room. All eyes turn to you, assessing, curious. It's a chilling moment, like being observed by a flock of exotic birds, each one appraising your worth. You feel a flush rise to your cheeks, acutely aware of being the newcomer, the unknown quantity. Some of the women offer small, hesitant smiles. Others simply stare with an unreadable expression. You find an empty seat at the far end of the table, near Eleanor, who gives you a faint nod of encouragement. It's a bit like the first day at a new school, only the stakes are infinitely higher, and the curriculum is far more unforgiving. One quirky tidbit is that in some higher-class brothels, dinners were almost theatrical events, with elaborate meals served to impress clients. Even if the women themselves often picked at their food due to stress or lack of appetite, it was all part of the performance. The meal is simple but hearty, a thick stew, fresh bread, and weak tea. It's a feast compared to what you've been eating, and you eat slowly, savoring each mouthful. The women around you chat quietly, their voices low, discussing the day's events, making small, almost mundane observations. They talk about troublesome clients, about Madame's moods, about the weather. It's a strange juxtaposition, the casual chatter against the backdrop of their profession. It's a coping mechanism, you realize, a way to normalize the abnormal, to create a semblance of ordinary life within these extraordinary circumstances. You listen more than you speak, absorbing the rhythm of their conversations. You learn names, glimpse personalities. There's Mary, older and stoic, with a dry wit that occasionally brings a ripple of quiet laughter to the table. There's Lily, younger and more vivacious, but with a fragility around her eyes. And there's always the undercurrent of shared experience, the unspoken understanding that binds them together. Historians still argue whether the apparent solidarity among women in brothels was genuine affection or simply a pragmatic alliance forged by shared hardship. It's likely a bit of both, a complex tapestry of human connection in an unforgiving environment. You even hear a dark joke about a client who asked for a pure woman. One of the girls quipped, "Pure? My dear, the only pure thing in this house is the gin." A few snorts of laughter follow. You notice the hierarchy too, subtle but present. Some women seem to command more respect, perhaps due to their longevity, their beauty, or their ability to handle difficult situations. Others are quieter, more withdrawn, their eyes holding a deeper sadness. You try to blend in, to observe, to learn the unspoken rules of this new sisterhood, this strange, enforced family. It's a delicate dance, navigating these new social dynamics, where trust is a luxury few can afford. You finish your meal, feeling a warmth spread through your body, a physical comfort that momentarily eclipses the anxiety in your mind. This is what survival looks like, you think. Not pretty, not clean, but survival nonetheless. The morning after your arrival begins, not with a gentle awakening, but with the insistent clamor of a bell, sharp and jarring. You're jolted awake, disoriented for a moment, before the stark reality of your new surroundings floods your senses. The small room, the unfamiliar bed, the lingering scent of that heavy perfume from downstairs. It all clicks into place. This isn't a dream. It's your new, bewildering life. You quickly dress in your own clothes, the same worn ones you arrived in, and hurry down the carpeted stairs. The house is already bustling, a hive of quiet activity, different from the somber silence of the night before. You find your way back to the dining room, where a simple breakfast of stale bread and weak tea is laid out. The other women are there, some looking tired, others surprisingly bright, as if they've already accustomed themselves to this relentless pace. Eleanor gives you a small, tired smile. "Up and at M," she murmurs, a hint of dry humor in her voice. This is the routine. You realize the steady rhythm that governs life in the house. There's no room for lingering, no time for self-pity. You eat quickly, listening to the snippets of conversation around you, trying to absorb the unspoken rules, the subtle cues. It's all part of learning the ropes, this silent apprenticeship in a world you never imagined. Soon after breakfast, Madame summons you. You follow her into a small, sparsely furnished room at the back of the house, which you quickly deduce serves as her office. The air here is heavy with the scent of old paper and something vaguely medicinal. She sits behind a large, imposing desk, her gaze as sharp and unwavering as it was when you first met her. Now, she begins, without preamble, "We must prepare you. Your education in the life begins with a brutal assessment of your appearance." Madame circles you slowly, her eyes missing nothing. She points out the wear on your clothes, the dullness of your hair, the pallor of your skin from weeks of poor nutrition. It's a professional critique, devoid of cruelty, yet it cuts deep. You feel yourself shrinking under her scrutiny, keenly aware of every imperfection, every mark of hardship that you carry. She speaks of presentation, of appeal, of the importance of making a good impression. It's about selling an illusion, you understand, a fantasy for the gentleman who will cross the threshold. Historians still argue whether the elaborate costumes and makeup used in brothels were primarily to attract clients or also served as a form of emotional armor for the women, allowing them to separate their personal selves from their professional roles. It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? Then comes the transformation. You're led to a small, adjoining room, packed with an array of dresses, corsets, ribbons, and hats. It's a strange trove, a mixture of faded grandeur and slightly worn finery. You're told to remove your old clothes, and for a moment, you hesitate, feeling a wave of vulnerability. But then you remind yourself, what's left to hide? You strip down, feeling the sudden chill of the air on your skin. Madame, or one of the older girls, perhaps Eleanor, begins the process of dressing you. First, the undergarments, layers of petticoats and corsets that are tightly laced, pulling your waist in, forcing your posture upright. It's uncomfortable, restrictive, but you can already feel the subtle change in your silhouette. It's a bit like being molded into a new shape, a kind of human sculpture designed for specific tastes. Next come the dresses. Madame selects a gown for you, a deep jewel-toned fabric, perhaps a dark blue or emerald green, that feels surprisingly heavy and rich against your skin. It's a style popular among the demi-monde, designed to accentuate certain features while hinting at modesty. You stand before the mirror, a new person emerging. The clothes, surprisingly, do make a difference. They conceal the signs of your recent poverty, replacing them with an outward appearance of allure. Your shoulders feel straighter, your head held a little higher, almost as if the fabric itself has imbued you with a different kind of confidence. It's a peculiar sensation, this feeling of becoming someone else, a character in a play. I heard a joke once about a new girl in a brothel who asked, "Do I have to wear this corset all night?" And the madame replied, "Darling, the only thing that comes off easily in this business is your reputation." A dark chuckle, but a truth nonetheless. Then comes the hair and makeup. Your hair, previously tied back simply to keep it out of your face, is brushed until it gleams, then skillfully arranged into a fashionable style, perhaps with soft curls around your face, or swept up into an elegant chignon. You're handed a small pot of rouge, a kohl pencil, and a powder puff. You're instructed on how to apply them, subtly at first, to enhance your features, to give your cheeks a healthy flush, to make your eyes seem larger and more inviting. It's a delicate art, this painting of a face, transforming weariness into allure. A mainstream historical fact is that while overt makeup was considered scandalous for respectable women, it was an accepted and even expected part of the presentation for women in brothels. It was a clear visual demarcation, a signal of their profession. You look at your reflection, a stranger gazing back. The woman in the mirror is polished, alluring, a far cry from the shivering, hungry girl who knocked on the door just yesterday. It's unsettling, this transformation, but also strangely fascinating. You're no longer just you. You are now an object of desire, a carefully curated fantasy. This process of beautification isn't about making you feel good. It's about making you appealing to others, a tool in the house's trade. One quirky tidbit is that some madames would even instruct their girls on conversational topics, providing them with a superficial veneer of education to appeal to wealthier, more intellectual clients. It was about offering a complete package, a brief escape from the mundane. Madame then drills you on etiquette, how to sit, how to stand, how to offer a polite smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. You learn about maintaining a certain distance, even while inviting intimacy. It's a paradox, this training to be alluring but not too eager, engaging but not too familiar. You practice walking across the room, your posture now constrained by the corset, learning to glide rather than trudge. It's an exhausting rehearsal, a meticulous preparation for a performance that will take place every night. You find yourself mimicking her gestures, her modulated tones, trying to internalize the role you are expected to play. The day feels long, filled with these lessons in transformation and presentation. By the time evening approaches, you are physically tired, but your mind is buzzing with the sheer volume of new information, the new rules of this strange game. You have been stripped down, reshaped, and presented as a new entity ready for consumption. You are no longer just a woman seeking refuge. You are now a working girl, a part of Madame's establishment, an offering to the gentlemen of London. The thought is both terrifying and, in a strange, detached way, almost liberating. There's a grim freedom in shedding your old self, even if it's for a gilded cage. As dusk begins to fall, a palpable shift occurs within the house. The quiet hum of the day, filled with preparations and hushed instructions, gives way to a low, anticipatory thrum. You've spent the afternoon in your room, trying to make sense of the dizzying array of new rules and expectations, and perhaps trying on the unfamiliar clothes, feeling the stiff lace and tight corsetry. Now, a bell chimes, a softer, more inviting sound than the morning's harsh summons, signaling the descent into the evening's activities. This is your cue, your entry into the main stage of this strange new world. You make your way downstairs, your movements still a little awkward in the restrictive gown Madame chose for you. It's a deep crimson, a color you'd never dared to wear before, and its richness feels almost alien against your skin. The corsetry, while uncomfortable, has indeed reshaped your figure, pushing your chest forward and cinching your waist dramatically, creating the fashionable silhouette of the era. Your hair, meticulously styled, feels heavy but perfectly placed. As you descend the final steps, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a large, ornate mirror in the hallway. The woman staring back is almost unrecognizable, a stranger, alluring, and confident, a stark contrast to the weary girl you were just yesterday. It's a fascinating, if unsettling, transformation, like watching a chrysalis unfold into something beautiful, yet knowing the beauty serves a very specific, commercial purpose. The parlor, which was quiet and dimly lit during the day, is now bathed in the warm, inviting glow of gaslight. A fire crackles merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rich wallpaper and polished furniture. The air is thick with the scent of burning logs, faint cigar smoke from an earlier guest perhaps, and the pervasive heavy perfume that seems to cling to everything in this house. Several other women are already present, seated gracefully on velvet sofas or standing by the large bay window, their gowns shimmering in the lamplight. They look like exotic birds, each in their own vibrant plumage, ready for display. A mainstream historical fact is that gaslighting was still relatively new and expensive in Victorian homes, and its use in brothels was a deliberate choice to create an opulent, inviting atmosphere, often contrasting sharply with the dimmer lighting in everyday homes. It was part of the illusion of luxury. You find an empty seat on a plush sofa, trying to mimic the languid ease of the other women. You watch them, absorbing their postures, their subtle gestures. Some are chatting quietly amongst themselves, their voices low and melodious, while others simply gaze into the crackling fire, their expressions unreadable. It's a silent rehearsal, a moment of calm before the storm. A piano in the corner, played by a unseen musician, tinkles a soft, melancholy tune, providing a gentle backdrop to the scene. It's an almost theatrical setting, you realize, designed to lull, to charm, to create an atmosphere of decadent relaxation. Then, the front door chimes, and the first gentleman arrives. All eyes, subtly, shift towards the entrance. He's a stout, middle-aged man, dressed in a respectable dark suit, his bowler hat clutched in his hand. He offers a polite nod to Madame, who greets him with a demure smile and a soft, welcoming murmur. He casts his eyes around the room, a slow, appraising gaze that settles on each woman in turn, lingering just a moment too long. It's an uncomfortable scrutiny, making you feel less like a person and more like an item on a shelf, waiting to be selected. You try to keep your expression neutral, a polite, almost vacant smile fixed on your lips, just as you were instructed. It's like being a prize-winning cat at a show, except the whiskers are painted on and the purr is entirely for show. Other men begin to arrive, singly or in pairs. They are a varied lot, young dandies with slicked back hair and flashy waistcoats, older businessmen with grave expressions, even a few military officers still in uniform. They mingle, exchange pleasantries with Madame, and then turn their attention to the women. Some approach directly, engaging in light conversation, while others stand back, observing, making their choice silently. You notice the subtle cues. A raised eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head, a quiet word exchanged with Madame. This is the dance, the silent auction of companionship. One quirky tidbit is that in some higher class brothels, gentlemen would often bring gifts, not necessarily expensive ones, but small tokens like chocolates or flowers, as a gesture of courtesy before making their selection. It added a veneer of gentility to the transaction. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach. This is it. This is the moment your life truly changes. You catch Eleanor's eye across the room. She offers you another small, reassuring nod, a silent message of shared experience. It's a strange sort of comfort, knowing you're not entirely alone in this peculiar performance. You remember her earlier warning about trusting no one, but in this moment, her silent support feels genuine. A small anchor in a sea of overwhelming new sensations. I heard a joke once about a man who, upon entering a brothel, declared, "I want a woman who can discuss philosophy." The Madame, without missing a beat, replied, "Sir, for that price." She discussed the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, even if she doesn't understand a word of it. It's a grim chuckle, but it highlights the performative nature of the interactions. As the evening progresses, you watch the other women engage with the clients. They are masters of their craft, maintaining a delicate balance of allure and detachment. They laugh at the men's jokes, listen intently to their stories, and offer compliments with a practiced ease. Their smiles seem genuine, their eyes sparkling, but you sense the underlying performance, the careful curation of emotion. It's a facade, a necessary mask to wear. You try to emulate them, to project an air of approachable charm, even as your heart pounds in your chest. You are approached by a gentleman, older, with kind eyes, and a weary demeanor. He offers you a seat next to him and begins to speak of the weather, of the day's news, of trivialities. You listen, offering polite responses, your mind racing. This is your first official engagement, your first true test. You focus on his words, on maintaining the polite facade, on pushing down the rising tide of apprehension. This is your role, you remind yourself. This is what you must do to survive. Historians still argue whether the apparent politeness and decorum in many Victorian brothels were a genuine attempt to create a respectable environment for clients, or simply a commercial strategy to attract a wider clientele who might otherwise shy away from more overtly crude establishments. It's a fascinating reflection on societal hypocrisy. The evening stretches out. A series of introductions and polite conversations, some brief, others extending for longer periods. You feel the weight of your new identity, the constant pressure to perform, to be charming, to be what the clients desire. It's exhausting, but you push through it, driven by the sheer force of necessity. This is your life now, and you are learning to navigate its currents, one polite smile, one forced laugh, one veiled glance at a time. The parlor, once a strange and intimidating space, now begins to feel slightly less foreign. Albeit still utterly surreal, the parlor continues its steady hum of activity, a stage upon which desires and illusions are subtly exchanged. You find yourself in a delicate dance with the gentleman who approached you, a man whose presence feels more like quiet resignation than eager pursuit. His name, he offers, is Mr. Davies, and he speaks of his work at a municipal office, the endless ledgers, and the damp chill that pervades official buildings. You nod, offering polite affirmations, careful to keep your responses brief and neutral, just as Madame instructed. Your smile, you hope, conveys interest without inviting too much familiarity. It's a precarious balance, this performance of attentive companionship. He asks about your background, a seemingly innocent question that sends a flicker of panic through you. You quickly recall Madame's stern warning about personal conversations. I am new to London, you reply, a half-truth that feels safer than outright invention, and seeking a better life. It's vague enough, perhaps even relatable, painting a picture of an earnest country girl rather than a woman desperate enough to be here. He accepts it with a gentle nod, seemingly satisfied, and the conversation drifts back to the mundane. You realize that most of these men aren't looking for your life story. They're looking for an escape from their own. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that many Victorian gentlemen frequented brothels not just for sexual services, but also for companionship, conversation, and a temporary respite from the rigid social conventions of their own homes and marriages. It was a space where they could relax and be themselves. However, briefly, as the evening progresses, you notice the subtle signals that pass between the women and the clients. A knowing glance, a shared private joke, the way a hand lingers a moment. Too long when a drink is passed. These are the unspoken rules of engagement, the nuances you must quickly learn to navigate. You watch Eleanor, who seems to glide through the room with an almost ethereal grace, her laughter light and melodic, yet her eyes retaining that weary, knowing look. She's a seasoned performer, you realize, a veteran of this silent war of attrition. It's a bit like watching a master weaver at work, their hands moving so quickly and deftly that you can't quite follow the pattern, but the exquisite result is undeniable. You observe the varied interactions. Some men are boisterous, demanding, their voices loud and their hands quick to wander. Others are quiet, almost shy, content with just a few moments of polite conversation, seeking solace rather than excitement. You learn to read their faces, to anticipate their moods, to adjust your demeanor accordingly. It's an exhausting mental exercise, this constant calculation of how to be, how to respond, how to remain safe. You recall the jokes you heard the other day, the dark humor about gin and philosophy. There's a bitter truth in them, isn't there? It's all a performance. Every gesture, every word, every carefully constructed smile. Suddenly, Mr. Davies, after a long silence, reaches into his waistcoat pocket and pulls out a small, ornate purse. The sight of it sends a jolt through you, a mixture of apprehension and a strange, cold relief. This is the moment. The polite conversation ceases, and the unspoken intention hangs heavy in the air. He doesn't say anything explicitly, but the gesture is clear. This is the transaction, the crossing of the invisible line from mere companionship to something more. Your heart begins to pound, a frantic drumbeat against your ribs. One quirky tidbit is that in many brothels, the initial selection and negotiation of terms often happened in a communal parlor, making the transaction public and often, for the women, quite dehumanizing, despite the polite veneer. It added to the feeling of being displayed. You've been coached on this, of course. Madame explained the protocol. You are to nod, gracefully accept the offered sum, and then, if the gentleman indicates, lead him upstairs. It's meant to be seamless, discreet, a transition that preserves the illusion of genteel interaction. You reach out, your hand trembling almost imperceptibly, and take the coins from his outstretched palm. The metal feels cold and heavy against your skin. It's not a lot, you realize, but it's enough to buy a few more meals, to keep a roof over your head for another day. It's survival, tangible and undeniable. If you please, Mr. Davies says, his voice a low murmur rising from the sofa. He doesn't look at you directly, his gaze fixed on some point beyond your shoulder. It's a deferential tone, almost apologetic, but it doesn't diminish the stark reality of the exchange. You rise, your crimson gown rustling softly, and led the way towards the staircase. Each step up feels like a step further into an unknown abyss. You can feel the eyes of the other women on your back, not judgmental perhaps, but certainly watchful. They know this moment. They've lived it countless times. As you ascend the stairs, you cling to the instructions Madame gave you, trying to remember every detail, every subtle nuance. It's a script, you tell yourself, a role you must play. You are not you right now. You are the character. Historians still argue whether the perceived passivity or apparent willingness of women in brothels was a genuine reflection of their agency or simply a survival mechanism, a performance to ensure their safety and continued employment. It's a complex question about control and consent in a deeply unequal society. You reach the top landing, the muffled sounds from the parlor fading below. The hallway is dimly lit, the gaslights casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air here is quieter, heavier, filled with the unspoken weight of the transactions taking place behind each closed door. You lead Mr. Davies to the first available room, pushing the door open with a practiced ease you didn't know you possessed. The room is small, simply furnished, a bed, a washstand, a single chair. The air is slightly stale, smelling faintly of masculine cologne and something vaguely floral, a lingering scent from a previous encounter. You step inside, leaving the door ajar for a moment, an unspoken invitation for him to follow. He enters, and then, with a quiet click, the door closes. Behind you, the sound is startlingly final, sealing you inside with a man you barely know in a situation you never imagined. The world outside, the bustling city, the cold streets, Madame's watchful eye, all recede. It's just you and him in the quiet intimacy of this small, temporary space. A strange kind of silence settles between you, broken only by the soft rustle of your dress and the heavy thud of your own heart. This is it. The real work has begun. The click of the door closing behind you echoes in the small room, a startlingly loud sound in the sudden quiet. The world outside, with its bustling parlor and Madame's watchful eye, seems to vanish, leaving only you and Mr. Davies. The air, previously thick with the parlor's perfumes and the vague scent of cigar smoke, now holds a more intimate, unsettling quality. You can faintly smell his starch and a hint of something clean, like soap. This is the moment where the performance moves from the public stage to the private one, where the carefully constructed facade must be maintained even in the stillness. You turn to face him, your mind racing through Madame's instructions. Maintain eye contact, but not too boldly. A gentle smile, but not too inviting. The dance of desirable detachment. Mr. Davies, for his part, seems a little hesitant himself, perhaps a bit awkward. He removes his hat, placing it carefully on the small, solitary chair, and then slowly unbuttons his suit jacket. There's a quiet formality to his movements, almost as if he's preparing for a business meeting rather than an illicit encounter. This lack of overt eagerness, strangely, makes the situation even more unnerving. It's a bit like being in a play where your scene partner seems to have forgotten their lines. He clears his throat. "It's a cool evening, isn't it?" he murmurs, his voice low. You agree, offering a soft, almost imperceptible nod. Small talk, you realize, is still part of the prelude, a way to ease into the uncomfortable intimacy. You note the slight tremor in his hand as he reaches up to loosen his tie. He's not as composed as you expected, which ironically makes your own practiced calm feel even more like a shield. You remember Eleanor's warning about keeping your wits about you. It rings true now, more than ever. The silence that follows. His statement stretches, becoming heavy with unspoken expectations. This is where the transaction truly begins, beyond the exchange of coins downstairs. This is the negotiation of boundaries, the silent understanding of what will and will not transpire. Madame's lessons on accommodation flood your mind. You are to be agreeable, compliant, but also to maintain a subtle control, a quiet dignity. That, for many women, was their only remaining possession. Historians still argue whether the perceived control some women maintained in these private encounters was a genuine form of agency or merely a coping mechanism within an inherently powerless situation. It's a nuanced debate, certainly. He finally looks at you, his eyes holding a mix of weariness and something akin to quiet desperation. There's a loneliness there, you recognize, a familiar ache that you've come to know intimately. He doesn't speak, simply gestures vaguely towards the bed. This is it. The moment you've been dreading, yet preparing for. You take a slow, deep breath, trying to steady your pounding heart. You remind yourself of the warmth of the room, the food you had, the roof over your head. This is the cost. You approach the bed, your movements deliberate, graceful, as you were taught. There's a small, ornate lamp on the bedside table, casting a soft, yellowish glow. You reach out, your fingers brushing against the cool metal of the lamp, and subtly dim it, creating a softer, more forgiving light. It's a small act of control, a tiny assertion of agency within a situation where you possess very little. You turn, offering him another slight, almost imperceptible smile. It's a silent invitation, but one wrapped in a cloak of practiced detachment. It's like watching a tightrope walker. Every step is deliberate, every movement controlled, knowing that a single misstep could lead to a fall. Mr. Davies then begins to speak again. Not about the weather, but about his life, his regrets, the burdens he carries. He talks about his wife, long deceased, and the quiet emptiness of his large house. He speaks of a loneliness that seems to weigh him down more than any illicit desire. You listen, truly listen, offering murmurs of understanding, small nods of empathy. It's a strange turn, isn't it? You, a woman selling intimacy, becoming a confessor for a stranger. But you understand this, too, is part of the transaction. Sometimes, the men sought an ear, a brief moment of human connection, more than anything else. A mainstream historical fact is that many clients used brothels as a safe space to confide personal troubles or anxieties that they couldn't share with their wives or within rigid Victorian social structures. The women, in turn, often became reluctant confidants. He doesn't press you for conversation about yourself, which is a relief. He simply talks, and you are the silent, attentive listener. You realize that your value in this moment is not just your body, but your ability to create an illusion of genuine connection, a brief respite from the harsh realities of his own life. You nod, offering words of gentle encouragement when appropriate, your voice soft and soothing. It's a delicate dance, avoiding any direct questions, yet conveying a sense of understanding. It's a peculiar irony, offering comfort to a man whose visit is, in itself, a source of your own discomfort. I heard a joke once about a client who, after a long evening of talking about his troubles, turned to the girl and said, "You're a better listener than my wife." And she replied, "Well, sir, for this price, I have to be." A grim laugh, but it perfectly encapsulates the strange dynamics at play. As the hour progresses, the conversation becomes more personal for him, though still carefully guarded on your part. You learn snippets of his life, glimpses into a world far removed from your own. He speaks of the pressures of his work, the expectations of society, the crushing weight of respectability. You recognize the different kind of cage he inhabits, one built of social norms and unspoken rules, as confining in its own way as your economic one. This shared vulnerability, however brief and imbalanced, creates a strange atmosphere in the room, a fleeting bubble of human interaction that transcends the raw nature of the transaction. Finally, there's a lull in his narrative, a quiet sigh. From him that signals the turning point. The purpose of his visit, the underlying reason, reasserts itself. He reaches for your hand, his touch hesitant, almost timid. You don't recoil as you were instructed. You allow the contact, maintaining your carefully constructed facade of placid acceptance. This is the moment the true work begins, the physical aspect of the service. You steel yourself, your mind already detaching, creating a barrier between your inner self and the body that is now, for this brief period, a commodity. You close your eyes for a brief moment, picturing the warm meal you had, the small, clean room upstairs. This is the trade. The small room, with its single gaslight and the faint scent of stale perfume, feels suddenly stifling. Mr. Davies, after his quiet confessionals, has now shifted, his hand resting hesitantly on yours. It's a moment of profound vulnerability, not just for him, but for you. This is where the unspoken contracts are fulfilled, where the emotional and physical lines blur or are perhaps forcibly drawn. You maintain your placid expression, your gaze soft but distant, as you were meticulously trained. It's about presenting an agreeable canvas, a receptive silence, rather than genuine emotion. He speaks softly, almost apologetically, of his desire. It's not crude or demanding, but rather a quiet, weary longing. You offer a small, understanding nod, allowing him to lead. You've practiced this in your mind, disconnecting from your body, transforming it into a vessel, a tool for the transaction. You help him with his jacket, and then, with practiced ease, begin to unfasten the intricate buttons of your own gown. It's a ritual, almost a ceremony, performed countless times by the women in this house. A silent prelude to the intimacy that is about to unfold. The layers of fabric fall away, the crimson silk, the stiff corset, the rustling petticoat siege. A small shedding of your public persona, revealing the vulnerable self beneath. But even this vulnerability is part of the performance. A carefully managed unveiling as the clothes come off. The air in the room seems to thicken, heavy with unspoken expectations. You move with a deliberate grace, every action measured, every touch precise. Your hands, once chapped and rough from street labor, now seem almost delicate in the dim light. You assist him, and he, in turn, helps you with the remaining fastenings of your dress, his fingers brushing against your skin. The contact is impersonal, almost mechanical, yet it sends a shiver through you, not of desire, but of the cold, hard reality of the situation. This is your body, your essence, reduced to a service, a fleeting pleasure for another. Historians still argue whether the apparent consent in these encounters, given the economic duress many women faced, can truly be considered consent in a modern sense. It's a stark reminder of the power imbalances inherent in Victorian society. You lie back on the bed, the mattress surprisingly soft beneath you, the cool sheets a small comfort. You close your eyes for a moment, not in anticipation, but in a brief act of self-preservation, separating your mind from the physical act. You focus on the distant sounds of the house, the faint murmur of voices from downstairs, the creak of floorboards above, the rhythmic ticking of a clock somewhere down the hall. These small, external noises become anchors, tethering you to a reality beyond the confines of this room, beyond the present moment. It's a bit like being in a theater and mentally drifting away to the snack bar during a particularly dull act. Mr. Davies is gentle, almost tentative. He speaks little, his breathing heavy in the quiet room. There's no passion, no overt emotion, just a quiet, almost melancholic act. You remain still, unresponsive, allowing the encounter to unfold. This, you realize, is the most dehumanizing aspect, the complete disengagement of your own desires, your own self, from the act. You are merely a vessel, a silent presence, facilitating another's fleeting moment of solace or release. A quirky tidbit from the era is that some gentlemen would explicitly ask for sleepers, women who would lie perfectly still and silent throughout the encounter, further emphasizing the transactional nature and the men's desire for a passive object rather than an active participant. The encounter is brief, almost perfunctory. When it's over, he shifts away, a sigh escaping his lips. There's a quiet regret in his eyes, a renewed weariness that seems to have deepened in the short time you've been together. You rise, pulling the sheet around you, and begin to redress. Your movements as efficient and detached as before. He, too, dresses quickly, avoiding your gaze, as if suddenly embarrassed by the intimacy, however transactional, that just passed between you. This is the moment of awkward transition, the return to a semblance of propriety after the brief plunge into the illicit. I heard a joke once about a client who, after a particularly quiet encounter, said, "You're a woman of few words." And the girl, with a dry smile, replied, "And you, sir, are a man of even fewer payments." It's a grim chuckle, but sometimes that's all you have. He reaches for his wallet, extracting a few more coins, perhaps a small bonus for your quiet compliance or his own residual guilt. He places them on the bedside table, avoiding direct contact, and then quickly makes his way to the door. "Thank you," he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper, and then he's gone. The click of the door closing behind him echoing once more in the now empty room. You are alone again, the immediate tension slowly draining from your body, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. You look at the coins on the table, cold and gleaming in the dim light. They are the tangible proof of what just transpired, the price of your survival. You pick them up, the weight of them strangely heavy in your palm. This is the currency of your new life, bought at a cost that extends far beyond mere shillings and pence. You slowly begin to tidy the room, smoothing the bedsheets, adjusting the lamp. It's a small act of reclamation, a way of erasing the immediate past, preparing the space for the next encounter, the next client, the next transaction. A mainstream historical fact is that many women developed coping mechanisms such as emotional detachment or compartmentalization to survive the psychological toll of their work. This ability to separate oneself from the act was crucial for their mental preservation. You feel it happening already, a subtle shift within you, a growing numbness that feels both frightening and necessary. The silence in the room after Mr. Davies' departure is thick, almost suffocating. You stand there for a moment, the cold weight of the coins still in your hand, feeling a profound sense of exhaustion settle over you. It's a weariness that goes beyond the physical. It's a deep-seated drain on your spirit. You smooth the crumpled bedsheets, adjust the small, slightly crooked lamp, and then slowly, meticulously, you redress yourself. Each button, each tie, each rustle of fabric feels like an act of putting on armor, preparing for the next assault on your senses, on yourself. You find yourself staring at your reflection in the cracked mirror above the washstand. The woman who stares back is still the alluring stranger in the crimson gown, her hair perfectly styled, her lips rouged. But now, if you look closely, you can see a faint tremor in your hand as you adjust a stray curl, a subtle hollowness in your eyes that even the coal cannot entirely conceal. This is the truth beneath the performance, the hidden cost of survival. It's like looking at a beautifully painted portrait and noticing the tiny crack in the canvas, hinting at the fragility beneath the artistry. There's no time to linger, no time for reflection. The house demands a constant rotation, a perpetual readiness. You make your way downstairs again, your steps slower now, your movements infused with a newfound weary grace. The parlor is still, bustling, perhaps even more so than before, filled with the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, and the ever-present, slightly off-key piano music. You find an empty spot on a sofa, trying to appear nonchalant, as if you've merely been on a brief errand. You catch Eleanor's eye, and she offers a knowing, sympathetic glance, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken experience. It's a small comfort, this shared understanding, a quiet solidarity among those who walk the same difficult path. Another gentleman approaches. A younger man this time, boisterous and a little too free with his compliments. His eyes linger on your décolletage, and he makes a suggestive remark that sends a cold shiver down your spine. You force a polite, almost vacant smile, recalling Madame's instruction to be accommodating but not overly familiar. You parry his words with vague responses, deflecting his advances with practiced ease, trying to steer the conversation towards lighter, less personal topics. This, you realize, is the constant negotiation, the subtle push and pull of boundaries that occurs with every interaction. It's a verbal fencing match, where your wit is your only weapon. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is the sheer emotional labor involved in this profession. Women were expected not only to provide physical services, but also to manage clients' emotions, flatter their egos, and often tolerate uncomfortable or even abusive remarks, all while maintaining a placid demeanor. He, unlike Mr. Davies, is less interested in conversation and more in direct pursuit. His hand brushes against your arm, then your waist, a little too boldly. You subtly shift away, maintaining the polite smile, but your internal alarm bells are ringing. You've heard stories from the other girls, whispers about difficult clients, about men who pushed boundaries, who didn't understand no or later. This is where the true danger lies, not just in the physical act, but in the unpredictability of human nature, the shifting moods of those you are meant to please. You wish for Madame's presence, for her silent, authoritative gaze to intervene. You try to divert his attention, pointing out a painting on the wall, commenting on the music, anything to create a distraction, to regain a sliver of control over the situation. He laughs, a loud, booming sound that seems to fill the room, and continues his advances. Your heart pounds faster, a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You realize that your polite resistance is being misinterpreted as coyness, an invitation for him to persist. This is a common and terrifying miscommunication, one that often leaves women in these situations with little recourse. It's a bit like trying to stop a charging bull with a polite request. You employ a technique you've seen Mary use, a sudden subtle shift in conversation, a direct question about his own life that requires a thoughtful answer, momentarily breaking his focus. "Are you fond of the theatre, sir?" you ask, your voice soft but clear, cutting through his boisterousness. It works, for a moment. He pauses, surprised, and begins to expound on his favorite plays, his tone shifting from aggressive pursuit to self-important monologue. You seize the opportunity, nodding intently, guiding the conversation away from your own person and onto his. This is the art of deflection, the strategic use of conversation as a shield. One quirky tidbit is that many women in brothels became incredibly skilled at engaging in intellectual or cultural discussions, far surpassing the education of many respectable women, simply because it was a valuable skill for attracting and managing clients. As the evening wears on, the parade of clients continues. Some are kind, like Mr. Davies, seeking only a brief solace or a moment of quiet connection. Others are demanding, their expectations clear and unyielding. You learn to discern the subtle differences, to anticipate their needs and desires, to mold yourself to fit their fleeting fantasies. You are a chameleon, constantly adapting, constantly performing. The exhaustion deepens, settling into your bones, a constant dull ache. You find brief moments of respite, slipping away to the privy or snatching a few minutes in your room, just to breathe, to be alone, to drop the mask for a fleeting moment. Historians still argue whether the apparent lack of resistance from many women in brothels was due to sheer economic coercion, internalized societal norms, or a calculated strategy for survival in a dangerous environment. It's a complex and often uncomfortable truth to confront. You know, deep down, that you are not entirely free. Your body is a commodity, your time is not your own, and your very survival depends on your ability to please. You even hear a new, dark joke whispered among the girls. What's the difference between a wife and a working girl? One expects love, the other expects payment, and only one always gets what she expects. It's a bitter truth, a shared laugh of grim resignation. By the time the last client leaves and the gaslights are dimmed, you feel utterly drained. Your face aches from the constant smiling, your body from the rigid corsetry and the constant performance. You climb the stairs to your small room, the silence now a welcome blanket, and collapse onto the bed, too tired to even fully undress. This is the rhythm of your new life, a relentless cycle of performance and exhaustion. You close your eyes, wishing for unconsciousness, for a brief escape from the demands of the day, and the even more daunting demands of tomorrow. The relentless rhythm of the house quickly establishes itself, a cycle of exhaustion and fleeting reprieves. Your small room, though sparse, becomes your sanctuary, a place where you can shed the crimson gown, loosen the torturous corset, and simply be for a few short hours. The silence, after the constant murmur and laughter of the parlor, is a balm to your frayed nerves. You often find yourself just lying on the narrow bed, staring at the brick wall outside your window, letting your mind wander, trying to recapture fragments of the person you were before. It's a bit like a ship taking refuge in a quiet harbor, battered but temporarily safe from the storm. These small moments of respite are precious. Sometimes, in the quiet morning hours before the house fully awakens, you'll slip downstairs to the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson, the cook, a stout woman with kind eyes and perpetually flour-dusted hands, might offer you an extra slice of bread or a small cup of hot tea, a gesture of silent sympathy that means more than any words. She never asks about your past, nor you about hers. But there's a shared understanding in the warmth of the kitchen, a temporary truce from the world's harsh demands. This unexpected kindness is a stark contrast to the transactional nature of your days and nights, a tiny flicker of genuine human connection in a place built on the opposite dot. You also find small comforts in the camaraderie with some of the other girls. Eleanor, in particular, becomes a quiet confidant. You'll sit together in the parlor during the infrequent lulls in the afternoon, mending a torn seam on a dress or simply sharing a cup of tea. She's seen it all, it seems, and her quiet observations offer a grim sort of wisdom. She teaches you little tricks, how to make the cheap rouge look more natural, how to avoid a client's insistent gaze without appearing rude, how to manage the persistent ache in your feet after hours of standing. These shared tips and whispered warnings are invaluable, a silent education in the art of survival within these walls. Historians still argue whether these bonds were truly deep friendships or pragmatic alliances for mutual protection. For you, in those quiet moments, it feels like genuine connection. Sometimes, a client might be surprisingly kind, not in a romantic way, but simply decent. There might be an older man, a professor perhaps, who only wishes to discuss poetry or current events, offering a generous tip for the conversation alone. Or a young, nervous soldier whose shyness is almost painful to witness, and for whom you offer a gentler, more maternal comfort. These encounters are rare, but they stand out, shining like small, unexpected gems in the otherwise monotonous landscape of your work. They remind you, fleetingly, that not all men are predatory, that some still possess a spark of humanity, even in this transactional environment. It's like finding a wildflower pushing through a crack in the pavement, unexpected but a welcome sight. You learn to find beauty in unexpected places, too. The way the gaslight catches the dust motes dancing in the air, transforming them into shimmering specks of gold. The intricate pattern on a teacup. The fleeting scent of lilac from a client's coat, a brief memory of spring in the confined space. These small sensory details become anchors, ways to ground yourself when the larger reality threatens to overwhelm. One quirky tidbit is that some madames would encourage their girls to cultivate small hobbies like embroidery or reading during their downtime, believing it made them seem more accomplished and appealing to certain types of clients. It was another layer of performance, but sometimes it offered a genuine escape. But these moments of reprieve are always fleeting. The shadow of the house always looms. The constant demand for your presence, for your charm, for your body is a heavy burden. The endless procession of new faces, new demands, new expectations blurs into a wearying monotony. You become adept at compartmentalizing, at separating the woman who sleeps in the small room upstairs from the alluring companion in the parlor. This mental detachment is a crucial survival mechanism, a way to protect your inner self from the degradation of your work. I heard a joke once about a client who asked a girl, "Do you ever get tired of this?" And she replied, "Only when I'm awake, sir." It's a bitter laugh, but it perfectly captures the constant exhaustion. The exhaustion is compounded by the ever-present awareness of your vulnerability. A mainstream historical fact is that disease, particularly venereal disease, was a constant and terrifying threat to women in brothels, often leading to disfigurement, chronic illness, and an early death. While Madame might offer some basic preventatives or rudimentary medical attention, it's often too little, too late, and the fear gnaws at you, a silent companion. You learn to recognize the signs, to watch for the telltale coughs or the gaunt faces of girls who have begun to sicken. Each cough, each whispered rumor of illness, is a chilling reminder of your own precarious health. And then there's the emotional toll. The constant performance, the forced smiles, the endless need to be agreeable. It chips away at you, day by day, like water eroding stone. You find yourself feeling less and less, a protective numbness spreading through your spirit. The boundaries between your real self and the character you play become increasingly blurred, and sometimes, in the quiet of your room, you wonder who you truly are anymore. This erosion of identity is perhaps the most insidious cost of all. Historians still argue whether the emotional detachment experienced by many women in this profession was a deliberate, conscious choice for self-preservation, or an inevitable, psychological consequence of their circumstances. It's a profound question about the human spirit's resilience and its limits. Despite the darkness, there are still glimmers, however faint. The shared laughter with Eleanor over a particularly ridiculous client, the warmth of a cup of tea from Mrs. Henderson, a kind word from Madame. On a rare occasion, when you've handled a difficult situation with aplomb, these small moments are not enough to lift the heavy weight of your situation, but they are enough to keep you going, to provide tiny points of light in the encroaching gloom. You cling to them, these brief reprieves, knowing they are the only solace you will find in this strange, gilded cage. The small comforts you find, the quiet camaraderie with Eleanor, Mrs. Henderson's occasional kindness, the fleeting decency of some clients are fragile shields against the omnipresent spectre that truly haunts the house: disease. It's a silent, insidious enemy, far more terrifying than any demanding client or madame's stern gaze. You see its effects, subtly at first, then undeniably, in the women around you. A persistent cough that deepens into a ragged wheeze, a skin rash that won't fade, a sudden, inexplicable fever that leaves a woman weak and disoriented for days. The fear is a constant, cold knot in your stomach. Every new client brings with him a hidden risk, a potential contagion. You try to be vigilant, to practice what rudimentary preventative measures Madame might grudgingly allow: a quick wash with carbolic soap, perhaps after an encounter, but these feel woefully inadequate against an enemy you can neither see nor truly understand. A mainstream historical fact is that venereal diseases, particularly syphilis and gonorrhea, were rampant in Victorian society, especially among the working class, poor, and those in professions like yours, due to a lack of understanding of germ theory, inadequate sanitation, and non-existent effective treatments. It was a terrifying reality, often leading to disfigurement, blindness, infertility, insanity, and an agonizing death. You watch as the illness takes hold of some of the girls. Mary, the stoic one with the dry wit, develops a persistent, racking cough that leaves her breathless. Her once sharp eyes become dull, her movements slow and labored. You hear the hushed conversations among the others, the worried whispers about the consumption, a polite euphemism for tuberculosis that steals breath and life slowly, mercilessly. You offer her what comfort you can: a warm cloth for her forehead, a quiet moment of companionship, but you know, deep down, it's not enough. It's like watching a candle flicker, knowing it will soon gutter out, and there's nothing you can do to keep it alight. Madame, for her part, maintains a pragmatic, almost clinical approach to illness. A sick girl cannot earn, and a visibly ill girl can drive away clientele. She provides basic tonics, often useless concoctions of herbs and alcohol, or calls for a local doctor, a grim-faced man who examines the women with detached professionalism, offering little more than palliatives. If a girl becomes too ill to work, she's often sent away, sometimes to a workhouse infirmary, sometimes simply cast back onto the streets to die alone. This is the ultimate dread, the fear that once your body is no longer profitable, you will be discarded like a broken doll. One quirky tidbit is that some brothels, particularly higher-end ones, would employ their own resident house doctor who would conduct regular, often intrusive, examinations of the women, supposedly to protect the client's health. It was a system that further dehumanized the women, treating them as little more than biological assets to be managed. The fear of contagion extends beyond the physical. There's the constant worry of your health being discovered by a client, which could lead to scandal, to a beating, or even worse, to being reported to the authorities. The Contagious Diseases Acts, though not uniformly enforced and often resisted, were a terrifying piece of legislation that allowed for the forced medical examination and detention of women suspected of being common prostitutes. The thought of being dragged away, subjected to humiliating examinations, and locked away in a lock hospital fills you with dread. Historians still argue whether these acts were a sincere, if misguided, public health initiative or a tool of social control. that disproportionately targeted and oppressed working-class women. For you, it's simply a terrifying threat that hangs over your head every single day. You become hyper-aware of your own body, scrutinizing every ache, every sniffle, every new mark on your skin. Is that cough just a chill, or something more sinister? Does this rash signal the onset of something irreversible? The anxiety is exhausting, adding another layer of burden to your already heavy load. You learn to hide any perceived ailments, to paint over the telltale signs of illness, to force a healthy flush to your cheeks, even when you feel feverish and weak. The performance never truly ends, even for yourself. You're always on guard, always acting, always hiding the grim truth of your body's vulnerability. It's like being a detective investigating your own decline, but with no way to solve the case. Sometimes, after a particularly demanding night, you dreams of coughing, fits of skin erupting in painful sores, of being abandoned in a cold, dark alley. You wake in a sweat, your heart pounding, the fear almost palpable in the dim light of your room. You then lie awake for hours, listening to your own breathing, checking for any new symptoms, until the first grey light of dawn begins to filter through your window, bringing with it the start of another day's grim work. I heard a joke once about a new girl who asked the older one, "What's the worst thing about this job?" And the older girl replied, "The clientele, the long hours." No, dear, it's the constant fear of not being able to complain about any of it. It's a dark chuckle, but it highlights the silence and the constant pressure to endure. The vulnerability you feel is profound. Your body, the very instrument of your survival, is also your greatest weakness, constantly exposed to unseen threats. This is the chilling reality of your profession. You are selling not just fleeting intimacy, but also, unwittingly, risking your very life. The fleeting moments of comfort, the shared meals, the quiet chats, they offer a momentary distraction, but they can never fully erase the shadow of disease that looms over every woman in the house. A constant reminder of the high stakes of their desperate gamble for survival. The fear of illness, like a damp chill, never truly leaves you. But it's not the only invisible chain binding you to Madame's house. There's another, more insidious one, forged from the very necessities of your existence: debt. From the moment you stepped through that door, you entered a system designed to keep you perpetually owing. Madame explained it on that first day, a cold, clinical recitation of figures that, at the time, seemed a fair trade for a roof over your head and food in your stomach. Now you understand its true, crushing weight. Every dress, every ribbon, every pot of rouge you wear, even the initial loan for food and lodging before you earned your first shilling, it all goes on your ledger. Madame, with her meticulous records, ensures you are constantly reminded of the sum you owe. A mainstream historical fact is that debt bondage was a common practice in Victorian brothels, often trapping women in a cycle where they could never earn enough to pay off their initial advances or cover the inflated costs of their basic necessities and work attire. It was a primary method of control, making escape virtually impossible. It's like a spider weaving its web, strand by painstaking strand. Until you're hopelessly entangled, you watch as the other girls navigate this financial labyrinth. Some, like Eleanor, have been here for years, their debt a constant, inescapable shadow. They earn, they pay, but the principal never seems to shrink, only to hover tantalizingly out of reach. Madame always has a new charge, a new expense too. add perhaps a new pair of shoes for work, or a fee for a doctor's visit, however brief and unhelpful. It's all meticulously documented, each entry a tightening of the invisible noose around your financial freedom. You even heard a joke once among the girls. What's the difference between a prison and Madame's house? In prison, they tell you, when your sentence is over. It's a bitter chuckle, but it perfectly sums up the feeling of being trapped. The percentage of your earnings that actually makes it into your own hand is shockingly small. You work long hours, endure uncomfortable encounters, and yet, when the weekly reckoning comes, most of your hard-earned money vanishes into Madame's coffers. You try to squirrel away a few coins, perhaps hiding them in a loose floorboard in your room or sewn into the hem of your discarded old dress. It's a desperate act of rebellion, a tiny flicker of hope that one day you might accumulate enough to buy your freedom, to simply walk out that door and never look back. But the sum needed always seems to grow larger, never smaller, always just beyond your grasp. One quirky tidbit is that some madames would deliberately keep their girls illiterate, or would restrict their access to paper and pencils, making it harder for them to keep their own accounts and verify the debts Madame claimed. This further cemented their power and control. It was a crude but effective form of financial illiteracy. You rely on the whispered advice of the older girls, their grim knowledge of Madame's accounting methods, trying to learn how to keep track, how to argue for a few pennies more. Though such arguments are rarely fruitful, there are moments of acute frustration, where the sheer unfairness of it all washes over you. You are working relentlessly, sacrificing your body and your spirit, and yet you remain perpetually enslaved by numbers on a ledger. You dream of a life where your earnings are truly your own, where you can make choices, however small, without Madame's calculations looming over you. A new dress, a warm meal outside the house, perhaps even a train ticket to a distant town where no one knows your name. These dreams, though faint, are what keep you going. Historians still argue whether the debt was always a calculated, deliberate form of exploitation, or if some madames genuinely believed they were offering a necessary service and simply covering their legitimate expenses, albeit with inflated prices. For you, the distinction is meaningless. The effect is the same. You are bound. The conversation at dinner might be light, the parlor inviting, but underneath it all, the invisible chains of debt constantly pull at you, a relentless reminder of your lack of freedom. It's a quiet dread, a constant hum beneath the surface of your daily interactions. You calculate, in your head, the impossible sums. How many gentlemen would it take? How many weeks, months, years? The sheer scale of it is overwhelming, a mountain of debt that seems to grow taller the closer you get to its base. The thought of ever truly paying it off seems fantastical, a story you tell yourself to maintain a sliver of sanity. This financial trap, unlike the direct physical dangers, is a slow, psychological torture, slowly eroding your hope for a future beyond these walls. It's a bit like being in quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Sometimes, a newer girl, emboldened by youthful naivete, might question Madame about her ledger, daring to suggest an inaccuracy. The response is always calm, always firm, and always unyielding. Madame merely points to her meticulously kept books, her expression one of patient exasperation. The figures are quite clear, dear. We all have expenses. This is the cost of your upkeep, and that is the end of the discussion. The unassailable logic of debt, meticulously recorded, crushes any flicker of rebellion. you learn to accept it, this perpetual state of owing. It becomes another part of the background hum of the house, like the ticking clock or the distant street. Sounds. It's a reality that shapes your every decision, limits your every possibility. You are a cog in a machine designed to generate income, most of which flows into someone else's pockets. And the very mechanism that keeps you alive, that provides you with food and shelter, is the same one that traps you, holding you captive in its financial embrace. The weight of debt is a constant, suffocating presence, heavier than any corset, tighter than any leash. Yet, even within the confines of Madame's house, even under the crushing burden of your ledger, your mind still dares to wander, to consider whispers of escape. It's a dangerous fantasy, one you rarely voice aloud, even to Eleanor, but it persists. A stubborn ember of hope in the vast darkness. You watch the occasional woman leave, sometimes carried out by discreet men in the dead of night, too ill to continue. More rarely, a woman might simply vanish, the whispers suggesting she either found a way out or met a less fortunate end. For you, the dream isn't about dying, it's about living differently. You find yourself observing the world outside the brothels, windows with a renewed intensity whenever you can steal a moment. You see the ordinary people on the street, the shopkeepers, the delivery boys, the women with their market baskets. They live lives that, to you, seem impossibly free, unburdened by the specific, intimate servitude that defines your days. You imagine what it would be like to walk down the street without the knowledge of where you've been, what you've done, what you are expected to do. It's a powerful, almost intoxicating vision of anonymity and simple freedom. A mainstream historical. Fact is that many women in these circumstances did dream of escape, often fueled by the promise of marriage, emigration, or simply a chance at a respectable life, however difficult to achieve. The idea of escape isn't always a grand, dramatic flight. Sometimes it's a quiet yearning for small dignities. To be able to choose your own clothes, to eat what you wish, to spend a whole day reading a book without interruption, to simply breathe air that isn't heavy with the scent of cheap perfume and stale cigar smoke. You squirrel away every stray coin, every unsolicited tip, the small hoard growing agonizingly slowly beneath a loose floorboard in your room. It's a fragile hope, easily shattered, but you cling to it with fierce determination. Each coin is a tiny chip against the towering wall of your debt. It's a bit like a mouse gnawing at the base of a giant tree, knowing it might take a lifetime to make a dent, but unable to stop trying. You listen to the stories, the hushed rumors of other girls who did manage to leave. Sometimes it was through the intervention of a genuinely kind client who helped them secure a position as a domestic servant in a far-off town. More often, it was simply a desperate dash into the night, risking everything for an uncertain future. These tales are rare, almost mythical, but they fuel your fantasies. You picture yourself on a train, watching the London soot disappear behind you, a vast, green landscape unfolding before your eyes. The thought is both exhilarating and terrifying. One quirky tidbit is that some social reformers, particularly those associated with rescue missions, would actively try to intercept women leaving brothels, offering them refuge and vocational training. In laundries or needlework factories, while well-intentioned, these places were often restrictive and harsh, simply trading one form of confinement for another. Historians still argue whether these rescue efforts truly offered liberation or merely shifted women into a different kind of controlled poverty. For you, the idea of another institutional setting however benevolent, still feels like a cage. The biggest obstacle, of course, is the debt. You know Madame will never simply let you walk away if you owe her money. She guards her investments. Fiercely, the thought of confronting her, of asking for your ledger to be cleared, fills you with dread. You can practically hear her calm, unyielding voice explaining the impossible sums. The fear of what she might do, how she might retaliate, is a powerful deterrent. And then there's the fear of the outside world itself. You've been shielded, in a perverse way, by the house. What skills do you truly possess beyond what you do here? How would you find legitimate work? The world outside, though free, is also unforgiving, especially for a woman with your past. You imagine different scenarios, perhaps saving enough to buy a small stall in a market, selling trinkets or fresh flowers, or finding a position as a laundress, scrubbing clothes until your hands bleed, but at least your earnings would be your own. The possibilities, though meager, feel vast and limitless compared to your current reality. You allow yourself to linger on these thoughts, tracing the contours of a different life, a future where your worth isn't measured by the shillings in a gentleman's hand. I heard a joke once from Mary, who said, "My dream escape, a gentleman who's a librarian, so he'll know how to keep a secret, and he'll be too busy reading to ask for anything else." It's a grim chuckle, but it highlights the desire for peace and privacy. The desire for escape is often strongest after a particularly difficult night, or when the weight of the debt feels most crushing. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, charting imaginary courses, calculating impossible budgets, and clinging to the fleeting image of a life unburdened. It's a fragile dream, constantly threatened by the harsh realities of the house, by the endless procession of clients, and by the constant, gnawing fear of disease. But it's your dream, and for now, it's enough to sustain you. A whispered promise of a possibility that keeps you going, even when all else seems lost. The dream of escape, however distant, is a precious, fragile thing, constantly under threat, not just from Madame's ledger or the relentless demands of the clients, but from the ever-present shadow of the law. While Madame's house might offer a veneer of discretion, it exists in a precarious legal space, constantly subject to the whims and pronouncements of officialdom. You learn quickly that even within these walls, you are not truly safe from the reach of authority, a force that can sweep in at any moment and overturn your already fragile existence. It's a bit like living under a perpetually cloudy sky, where you never know when the rain or something worse might come. You hear the whispers from the older girls about raids, not frequent, perhaps, but terrifyingly real. A sudden hammering on the door in the dead of night, the harsh glare of police lanterns cutting through the gaslight, the brusque, demanding voices of officers sweeping through the parlor, ordering everyone to stand still. Your heart pounds just thinking about it. You've practiced this scenario in your mind. Maintain a calm demeanor, avoid eye contact, answer only what is strictly necessary. It's another performance, but this one carries the real threat of arrest, public humiliation, and an even harsher form of confinement. A mainstream historical fact is that while prostitution itself wasn't strictly illegal in Victorian England for the women, disorderly houses, brothels, were police raids, often arbitrary and at the discretion of local constables, were a constant threat. Women found in such establishments could be arrested, fined, or, under the Contagious Diseases Acts, subjected to forced medical examinations and detention in lock hospitals, regardless of whether they were ill. This legal ambiguity kept both madames and their girls in a state of perpetual vulnerability. It was a weapon used not for justice, but for control. You've seen the aftermath of a minor scare, a rumor of an impending inspection that sent a ripple of panic through the house. Madame became even more stern, barking orders, ensuring every corner was meticulously clean, every girl perfectly presented, every record carefully hidden. It was a frantic scramble to create an illusion of respectability that could fool official eyes. However briefly, you noticed a small, hidden panel behind a bookshelf, a place where valuables and, presumably, incriminating documents could be secreted away. It solidified the understanding that this safe haven was anything but. Sometimes, it's not a full-blown raid, but a smaller, more insidious interaction with the law. A constable might pass by the house, casting a knowing, lingering glance at the drawn curtains. Or he might stop a girl on the street if she's sent out on an errand and subject her to a brusque interrogation, demanding to know her business, her residence. These smaller encounters are equally terrifying, reminding you that your identity as a fallen woman is constantly scrutinized, constantly judged by society. One quirky tidbit is that some police officers, particularly in less reputable areas, were known to accept bribes from madames in exchange for looking the other way or providing advance warning of impending raids. It was a murky world of corruption, adding another layer of risk and unpredictability. You try to imagine what arrest would be like: the cold, hard cell, the public shaming in court, the inevitable questions about your family, your past, all the things you've tried so desperately to bury. The thought is enough to make your stomach churn, a knot of icy fear. You've heard of women being sent to Magdalene asylums or reformatories, institutions supposedly designed to rehabilitate fallen women, but often little more than forced labor camps with rigid religious instruction. The idea of being stripped of your meager earnings, your few possessions, and forced into another form of servitude is a profound dread. Historians still argue whether the various legal measures targeting prostitution were genuinely intended to eradicate the practice or merely to control and regulate it, keeping it out of sight while still allowing it to serve a societal need. For you, the intent doesn't matter. The impact is all too real. The law, ostensibly a protector of order, feels more like an arbitrary hammer, ready to strike down those deemed undesirable. You even heard a dark joke among the girls. What's the difference between a client and a constable? The client pretends he doesn't know you, and the constable pretends he does. A bitter laugh, but one born of grim experience. You learn to move through the world, even within the confines of the house, with a heightened sense of caution, constantly aware of potential exposure. Every rustle at the door, every unfamiliar voice in the hallway sends a jolt of apprehension through you. The protection Madame offers, you realize, is conditional, extending only as far as it benefits her own enterprise. When the law truly comes knocking, she will protect her business first and her girls second, if at all. This constant, low-level anxiety, the fear of legal repercussions, adds another invisible chain to your already burdened existence. It limits your movements, stifles any thoughts of bold action, and reinforces the precariousness of your position. The dream of escape shrinks a little, weighed down by the heavy reality of a society that has little sympathy for women like you. You learn to live with this quiet dread, another constant companion in the strange, gilded cage of your life. It's always there, a whispered warning in the back of your mind, reminding you that your freedom, however illusory, is always just a moment away from being snatched away. The fear of the law is a constant, nagging presence, but even more terrifying, perhaps, is the reality of what lies outside Madame's carefully maintained walls, the street's harsh reality. You catch glimpses of it when Madame sends you on a rare errand, or when you simply peer out through a gap in the curtains. The women you see there are different. They lack the carefully cultivated facade, the deceptive allure of those inside. The houses, their faces are harder, their eyes more hollow, their movements sharper, more desperate. It's a chilling mirror of the life you might have had, or might yet face. They are the unfortunates of the streets, the common streetwalkers who brave the elements, the outright brutality, and the ceaseless hunger for meager coins. You see them huddled in doorways, shivering in thin shawls even on slightly warmer evenings, their voices hoarse from calling out to passers-by. Their clothes are often ragged, stained, far removed from the laundered finery of the brothel. Their eyes, when they meet yours, hold a raw desperation that makes your stomach clench. You might be trapped in Madame's house, but at least you have a roof, warmth, and regular meals. The street offers none of that. It offers only a colder, harsher struggle for survival. It's like looking out from a slightly worn but intact lifeboat and seeing others drowning in the churning sea. A mainstream historical fact is that street prostitution was often far more dangerous and less lucrative than working in a brothel. Women on the streets faced a higher risk of violence, robbery, disease, and arrest, with little to no protection. Their earnings were typically lower, and their lives far shorter and more brutal. They were the most marginalized of the marginalized, constantly exposed to the elements and the darkest sides of society. You hear stories, whispered among the girls in the house, about those who tried the street life and failed. Of beatings in dark alleys, of being robbed by clients, of collapsing from illness and hunger. These tales serve as grim warnings, reinforcing the unspoken contract of the brothel. It might be a cage, but it's a cage that offers a semblance of safety, a fragile illusion of protection from an even more brutal world. It makes the debt, the constant performance, and the emotional toll seem, in a twisted way, almost bearable. One quirky tidbit is that rivalries between streetwalkers and brothel workers sometimes flared up, with each group viewing the other with a mix of disdain and pity. Streetwalkers might view those in houses as slaves, while housegirls often saw streetwalkers as undisciplined and reckless, inviting unnecessary danger. It's a sad irony, isn't it? Both groups struggling in different ways, yet often divided by the very structures that oppressed them. You've witnessed a glimpse of this harshness yourself. Once, on an errand for Madame, you saw a group of men cornering a young woman on the street, her desperate cries echoing in the narrow alley. You hurried past, your heart pounding, averting your gaze, knowing that to intervene would put you at risk, knowing that your own fragility was barely concealed beneath your elegant gown. The helplessness you felt was a bitter taste in your mouth, a reminder of how thin the line truly is between your current precarious safety and outright peril. It's like watching a tightrope walker fall, knowing that you could be next. The contrasting realities are stark. Inside, there's the warmth, the food, the gaslight, the semblance of order. Outside, there's the biting wind, the gnawing hunger, the dark alleys, the constant threat of violence. Historians still argue whether the apparent protection offered by brothels was a genuine benefit for the women, or simply another form of control. ensuring their continued labor by making the outside world seem even more terrifying. For you, the fear of that outside world is very real, a potent deterrent that keeps your dreams of escape firmly tethered to your small, hidden stash of coins. You learn to appreciate the small dignities the house provides, however conditional they may be: the clean sheets, the hot water for washing, the relative privacy of your own room. These are luxuries that many women on the streets could only dream of. The contrast reinforces the complex trap you are in, a place that takes so much, but also provides just enough to make the alternative seem utterly unbearable. I heard a joke once from Eleanor: "Why don't streetwalkers ever play hide and seek? Because no matter where they hide, their troubles always find them." It's a bleak humor, but it captures the inescapable nature of their plight. The image of those women on the streets, their raw exposure, their undeniable suffering becomes a powerful force. It's a constant reminder of the high stakes, a silent warning that keeps you compliant, even when resentment gnaws at you. Your gilded cage, for all its constraints, still feels like a precarious sanctuary compared to the open, unforgiving wilderness of the London streets. And that, you realize, is part of its insidious power to make you fear freedom more than confinement. The constant, gnawing fear of the streets, the visible despair of the women who walk them, serves as a chilling reminder of your precarious position. But while your world inside Madame's house feels static, trapped in a relentless cycle, the world outside is subtly, almost imperceptibly, changing. You hear whispers from clients, snippets of conversations about shifting social tides, about reformers and public outcry, about new ideas bubbling up in the polite society that both condemns and consumes you. It's a distant hum, a faint tremor, but it's there, suggesting that even the seemingly unshakable foundations of your grim reality might one day shift. You overhear gentlemen in the parlor discussing newspaper articles about the social evil, often with a mix of indignation and detached curiosity. There's a growing public awareness, driven by earnest social reformers, journalists, and religious groups, who are beginning to shine a light into the dark corners of London's underbelly. They speak of the deplorable conditions of the poor, the plight of women driven to desperation, and the moral corruption they believe threatens the fabric of society. A mainstream historical fact is that the late Victorian era saw a significant rise in social purity movements and moral crusades against prostitution, often led by figures like Josephine Butler, who campaigned tirelessly against the contagious diseases, acts, and for better conditions for women. Sometimes, a client will pontificate on the subject, perhaps seeking to justify his own presence in the house by bemoaning the sad state of affairs. You listen, your face a mask of polite interest, while inside, you marvel at the hypocrisy. They speak of rescuing women, of reforming society, often without ever truly understanding the systemic poverty that pushed women like you into this life in the first place. It's like watching someone complain about a leaky roof while standing in the middle of a flood. You hear about these rescue missions and Magdalene asylums, places designed to take women off the streets and out of brothels, offering them a path to redemption. Eleanor, ever practical, snorts derisively at the mention of them. Redemption, they call it, she once whispered to you, more like scrubbing floors until your hands bleed for no pay and singing hymns until your throat is sore. One quirky tidbit is that many women who entered these reformatories found that discipline, lack of freedom, and often harsh labor to be little improvement on their previous circumstances. and many quickly left, returning to the very life they were supposedly saved from. It suggests that true change required more than just moralizing. Historians still argue whether the focus of these reform movements was genuinely humanitarian, driven by a desire to uplift the vulnerable, or if they were largely about maintaining social order and moral norms, effectively controlling female sexuality rather than addressing root causes of poverty. For you, the debates are abstract. The practical reality is that any escape offered by such institutions might simply be another cage, albeit one wrapped in religious rectitude. The idea of trading one form of servitude for another doesn't quite spark the flame of hope you yearn for. Yet, despite the cynicism, you sense a change in the air. The hushed secrecy around prostitution, while still prevalent, seems less absolute. There's a growing public conversation, however flawed, that acknowledges the existence of places like Madame's house, and the women within them, in a way that perhaps didn't happen so openly before. This visibility, however uncomfortable, might, in some distant future, lead to different possibilities, different choices for women like you. It's a bit like seeing tiny cracks appear in a massive, ancient wall, slow, almost imperceptible, but a sign that the structure isn't entirely immutable. You find yourself sometimes listening intently to the radio or reading discarded newspapers. When Madame allows them, trying to glean more information about these social movements. Are they truly gaining ground? Could they, perhaps, someday create a world where a woman isn't forced to sell herself to survive? The hope is faint, almost too fragile to acknowledge, but it stirs, within you, a tiny, rebellious flicker. I heard a joke once from a cynical, older girl. They say, virtue is its own reward. But darling, if that were true, they wouldn't need so many charities to preach it. A sharp, knowing chuckle, born of grim reality. The shifting social tides bring with them a peculiar sword. On one hand, they create more public scrutiny, potentially leading to more raids or stricter enforcement of laws. On the other, they spark conversations, however hypocritical, about the conditions that force women into this life, potentially paving the way for eventual, incremental changes. You are caught in the middle, a pawn in a larger societal debate. Your personal struggles playing out against a backdrop of public morality. You consider the prospect, what if these reformers truly succeeded? What would happen to houses like Madame's? What would happen to you? The questions hang in the air, unsettling and intriguing. Would you be truly saved, or merely pushed into another form of precarious existence? The future feels uncertain, but for the first time, you sense that it might not be entirely predetermined, entirely static. The world outside is moving, however slowly, and that movement, however distant, carries with it the faintest tremor of hope for change. The faint tremor of changing social tides, the whispers of reform, offer a distant, abstract hope. But within the immediate confines of Madame's house, and within the very core of your being, a more insidious change is taking hold. The toll on the spirit. It's a slow, relentless erosion, more damaging than any physical ailment or financial debt. The constant performance, the forced smiles, the endless commodification of your body and your emotions, it all chips away at who you are, leaving a hollowness in its wake. You find yourself less able to feel, to react. The initial shock and fear of your first clients have dulled into a weary resignation. The indignities, once acutely painful, now elicit little more than a detached sigh. It's a survival mechanism, you realize this growing numbness, a way to protect your inner self from the constant assault of your profession. But it comes at a cost. Your capacity for genuine emotion, for joy, for sorrow, begins to atrophy. It's like a garden slowly turning to dust, the vibrant colors fading, the life draining away, leaving only parched earth. A mainstream historical fact is that the psychological impact of prostitution on women in the Victorian era was profound, often leading to depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and a severe loss of self-worth. The constant performance of desirability, combined with the degradation, created a deep emotional scar that rarely healed. They were expected to be alluring, yet without personal agency, intimate, yet utterly detached. You notice it in the other girls too. Eleanor, for all her quiet wisdom, carries a deep wariness in her eyes that no amount of coal can conceal. Mary, despite her stoic exterior, sometimes drifts off into a silent, faraway gaze, as if her mind has simply retreated to a safer place. The laughter in the parlor, once perhaps genuine, now often sounds forced, a brittle tinkling that doesn't quite reach their eyes. It's a shared burden, this silent, spiritual decay. The sense of isolation deepens. Even amidst the camaraderie of the house, you feel profoundly alone. Who can you truly talk to about the things you see, the things you do, the things you feel? The other girls understand, yes, but speaking it aloud seems to give it more power, to make it more real. So, you mostly remain silent, bottling up the unspoken thoughts, the unacknowledged pain. This internal monologue becomes your only true confidant. It's a peculiar irony in a profession built on false intimacy. True connection feels more distant than ever. You find yourself engaging in small, unconscious acts of rebellion, tiny assertions of self that no one else would notice. You might choose a particular ribbon for your hair that Madame didn't explicitly suggest, or linger a moment longer at the window, simply breathing in the damp London air before descending to the parlor. These are desperate attempts to reclaim a sliver of your autonomy, to remind yourself that there is still a you beneath the painted face and the layers of silk. One quirky tidbit is that some women would keep small, hidden mementos, a faded ribbon, a pressed flower, a child's drawing, as a way to cling to their past identity and prevent complete emotional dissociation. It was a silent act of defiance. Against their circumstances, sleep offers little respite. Your dreams are often restless, filled with distorted faces of clients, the heavy scent of perfume, the endless murmur of the house. You wake feeling more tired than when you went to bed, the exhaustion now a permanent fixture in your bones. The lines between waking and dreaming, between your performance and your true self, begin to blur, making it harder to discern where one ends and the other begins. Historians still argue whether the emotional detachment developed by many women was a conscious coping mechanism for self-preservation or an inevitable psychological response to repeated trauma and degradation. It's a complex question about human resilience in the face of profound hardship. For you, it feels like both a deliberate shutting down of feeling to survive, but also an involuntary consequence that leaves you feeling hollowed out, a shell of your former self, the gentle sarcasm you once possessed. A defense mechanism against the world's cruelties has dulled. The small jokes you once shared with Eleanor now feel like brittle shards of memory, difficult to piece together. Laughter, when it comes, feels forced, an echo of what it once was. It's a bit like trying to sing a happy song when your heart is heavy, the notes come out, but they lack true resonance. I heard a joke once about a new girl who complained she couldn't smile anymore. The madame, ever practical, replied, "Darling, they pay for the shape of the smile, not the feeling behind it." It's a harsh truth, but one that resonates deeply within the walls of this house. The toll on your spirit is the quietest, yet most profound, consequence of your life in the brothel. It's not a wound that bleeds, but a slow, internal draining, leaving you with less and less of yourself to offer, even to yourself. You exist, you survive, you perform, but the vibrant spark that once defined you, the dreams, the innocence, the spontaneous joy, they are slowly, inexorably fading away, replaced by a quiet, pervasive emptiness that settles deep in your bones. The quiet erosion of your spirit is a constant, almost imperceptible process, yet sometimes, amidst the dull ache, a faint flicker ignites, a glimmer of hope. It might be sparked by a fleeting conversation, a discarded newspaper article, or simply the sheer stubbornness of your own will to imagine something better. Even in this gilded cage, the human heart, it seems, refuses to completely surrender to despair. It's a bit like seeing a single, determined daffodil pushing through the hardened winter earth. A fragile promise of spring. You find yourself clinging to these tiny sparks. Perhaps it's the occasional kind word from Mrs. Henderson, the cook who, on a rare day, might share a story of her youth, of a life lived outside the city's grim confines. Or it could be a fragment of a client's conversation about faraway lands, about opportunities across the seas. These anecdotes, however brief, paint pictures of a different existence, a world where the rules are not quite so rigid, where a past like yours might be less of a condemnation. A mainstream historical fact is that emigration, particularly to the British colonies or America, was often seen as a desperate, yet viable, escape route for women seeking to leave their past behind. While certainly not a guaranteed path to prosperity, it offered a chance at anonymity and a fresh start, far from the societal judgments of Victorian England. You imagine yourself on a ship, the vast, churning ocean stretching out before you, carrying you away from everything you've known, everything you've been, your hidden stash of coins. Slowly growing under the loose floorboard in your room becomes the tangible manifestation of this hope. Each shilling added is a whisper of possibility, a tiny step towards an uncertain future. You calculate, recalculate, the fares for passage, the cost of a new life. It seems impossibly far off, a mountain of pennies, but the act of saving itself is an act of defiance, a quiet refusal to accept your fate. It's like collecting drops of water in a thimble, knowing it will take an age to fill, but believing, just believing, that it might be possible. Eleanor, pragmatic as ever, often dampens your more romantic notions of escape. The world outside ain't all sunshine and daisies, dear, she'd warn, her voice low. And a woman like us, with no family name and no coin, finds herself quickly back in the gutter, or worse. Her words, though sobering, don't extinguish the flame entirely. They simply add a layer of hard-won realism to your dreams, making them less fanciful, perhaps, but also more resilient. One quirky tidbit is that some women, in a desperate bid for independence, would pool their meager resources or even form small syndicates to try and save enough money to open their own small, legitimate businesses, like laundries or small shops. These attempts rarely succeeded, but the desire for self-sufficiency was strong. The yearning for simple dignity is often a stronger pull than the lure of wealth or grand adventure. To be able to walk down the street and meet someone's gaze without shame. To make a decision, however small, that is entirely your own, unburdened by debt or madame's demands. To sleep soundly, without the phantom touch of clients or the fear of discovery. These are the humble aspirations that fuel your hope, the quiet freedoms you crave. Historians still argue whether the concept of rehabilitation for women in this profession was genuinely achievable within the societal structures of the time, or if the stigma was so pervasive that a true fresh start was virtually impossible. For you, the debate is personal. Can you ever truly shed the skin of your past? Can you ever escape the internal scars? You don't know, but the thought, the tantalizing possibility, is enough. You even heard a new, hopeful joke from a young new girl who, despite everything, managed to laugh. Why did the prostitute become a baker? Because she wanted to make her own dough and knead her own destiny. It was a silly joke, but it sparked a ripple of genuine, albeit weary, amusement. The prospect of a new beginning, however distant, becomes a powerful counterweight to the relentless psychological toll. It's the belief that perhaps, just perhaps, the erosion of your spirit isn't permanent, that the woman you once were, or a new, stronger version of her, might still be salvaged. This hope is not a grand, sweeping tide, but a quiet, persistent current, constantly pushing against the prevailing gloom. You lie in your bed at night, the hidden coins beneath the floorboards, a small, comforting weight. You imagine the moment you might walk out of Madame's house, not in the dead of night, not in fear, but with a quiet determination, carrying your meager belongings and a single, unshakable belief that a different life awaits. It's a fragile, audacious hope, but it's enough to carry you through another day, another night, another transaction. It's the breath you take, knowing that even in darkness there can be light.